Number 1. So I'm a 23-year-old female. I live in a townhouse with my 2 children, 2 and 6 months old. My fiancé did live with us until 2 weeks ago when I caught him trying to fuck other women and made him move out. That's important to the story. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and when he did live with us, my ex worked evenings. Sorry for the long post. Let me set the scene. We live in a tiny town in northern Pennsylvania. My lane of townhouses sits in front of a big field that runs to a lane of woods. As far as I'm aware, these woods stretch for at least a few miles, and I'm not aware of any houses in there or any roads that lead through them. My living room has 3 windows that look to the field, and my bedroom on the 2nd floor only has 1 window that faces that way as well. People do tend to walk their dogs back in the field, and kids sometimes play there, but I rarely see anyone close to my house. For that reason, I tend to leave my blinds and curtains open because I guess I just enjoy the view. So, in July 2019, I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep. All the lights were off, but I had my windows and blinds open since it's so warm. I was looking out the window and I noticed small red and white lights just outside. I got up and looked to realize that the lights were coming from a drone. I ran downstairs to where my fiancé of the time was sitting in the living room and ran to the window. I told him what I saw, but of course when he went to look, it was gone. I was paranoid that the drone could have had a camera on it and someone was watching me with it. I kept my blinds closed for a while after that. Fast forward to January of this year. I guess I stupidly got comfortable and assumed that whoever it was that was flying the drone was a one-time creep. My blinds were open and I had just gotten out of the shower. I was sitting on my bed pretty much naked except for my underwear, scrolling through my phone when out of the corner of my eye I saw lights again out of a dark window. It was that damn drone again. I ran out of my room and waited for a few minutes. I peeked back into the room and it was gone. I quickly shut my blinds and got dressed. Honestly, I felt sick at how stupid I was to leave my window open again, especially when I was practically naked. Now for the really disturbing part. My 2-year-old son and I were out in the field 2 weeks ago, 3 days after I kicked out my boyfriend, playing ball. I had my 6-month-old strapped to me in a baby carrier. Probably about a half hour after we had been out there, I heard a slight whirling noise coming towards us. I looked up and saw that damn drone flying towards us. I looked around and didn't see anyone. It stopped right over us. I freaked and grabbed my son and dragged him into the house, looking back at the tree line every so often as we went. I knew they had to be hiding in there. I went inside, closed the blinds, and called my mum and told her about the situation. She told me to just keep an eye out. I said I would. My son likes to line his toys up along the windowsill, so I figured it wouldn't hurt to open them up just an inch or so. A little while later, after we ate dinner and it was almost dark, I was feeding my 6-month-old and my son was playing. He was standing over by the window, lining up his toys. He started saying, "Dada, Dada." I assumed he was just missing his father and dismissed him by saying he was going to see him that weekend. He kept saying "Dada, Dada" though. I looked up and saw him pointing to the window, under the little gap the blinds didn't cover. I froze. I remembered that he calls any man with facial hair Dada because it reminds him of his father. But there was no way someone would be bold enough to actually come up to my window. Not when my neighbours are literally right there. Anyone could see them. But there aren't any lights back there, so unless someone actually stepped out of their house, I guess nobody would see them. Maybe it was my ex, but he should be at work at that time. I ran to the window and moved my son. I didn't want to lift the blinds, but honestly I was sure it had to be the person who had been creeping on me for the past year, and I wanted to see who it was. I pushed the blinds up and was looking at a man, who I definitely had never seen before, crouching in front of me. He was bald, with a mustache and goatee. I have no idea how old he was. He could have been anywhere from 30 to 50. When he saw me, he smiled and stood up. I yelled and told him to fuck off and that I was calling the cops. He just stood there, smiling at me like some freak. I was about to close the blinds again when he said something I couldn't hear. I told him to leave again and he said, louder this time, "I just want to talk to you." I shook my head no and yelled the same thing to him. He started slapping his hands on the window, yelling no, 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 over and over. I grabbed my phone, scared he was going to try and break in. I dialed 911. My kids were crying from the yelling, and I felt on the verge of tears. I told the operator what was going on. The whole time I was on the phone, the man was pounding on my window, screaming now. He was yelling all kinds of nonsense, and I only caught some of it. He said he'd been watching me for months. I'm beautiful. He wants me to come with him. He'll kill my children if I don't. The operator told me to go into an upstairs room and hide until the police arrive. My town doesn't have a police department, so we rely on the state police. She said it would be about 20 minutes, but to stay on the phone with her. The man was practically punching my window now and just screaming like a maniac. I was about to grab my kids and run upstairs when I heard someone else screaming. The man bolted. I looked out and saw my neighbor and his girlfriend. I opened the window and my neighbor said that he heard the man, so he ran around the building. He said when the guy heard him, he ran back into the woods and disappeared in a tree line. They said they also called the police. I thanked them 100 times. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They did a quick search around the building and in the trees, but obviously didn't find anything. I've been super paranoid since then and stayed at my parents' a few nights after it happened. I don't know why the guy targeted me or why he waited so long to do something. I'm just happy my neighbors were there to intervene, or who knows what would have happened. So, to the creep who's been stalking me and my family for the last year, I genuinely hope we never ever meet again. Number 2. This happened about 10 years ago. I lived in a really nice 4-bedroom house with my friend/landlord, Tim. We were living out in the country. Tim was at work, so I was home alone. It was a really nice spring day. Winter was ending, and we were getting into the sunny days, so I decided to leave the back door open. I was sitting in the TV room and heard commotion coming from the living/dining room. Tim would often have random friends or family come over, so I assumed it was just someone from his life showing up. I smiled at this guy and asked how he was, and very quickly noticed that he had rotted teeth and looked off. I then noticed about 4 police officers jumping over the back fence and running toward the house. I'm not sure what was going through my head at the time, but I headed toward the hallway. There were 3 doors in the hallway: the front door, a door to the garage, and a door to Tim's room. I briefly thought about going through the front door, but it was double bolted and needed a key. So I went into the garage. At that point, I remember thinking, well, at least there were 2 exits. I put my body weight against the door as he tried to push through. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, but felt so much longer. The cops banged on the door and I opened it. They shone a light in my face and asked me who he was. I explained I had no idea and I'd never seen him. In this time frame, he went into Tim's room and locked himself in the ensuite. The police smashed in the window and doused him with capsicum spray. The ambulance then removed him. The police told me later that he had been on a 3-day meth binge and threatened to stab his dad, which is why the cops were chasing him. Also, not really related, but the year before, Tim lost his house in Black Saturday. This was his rebuilt house. Very bad luck. Number 3. I grew up in a small town, the type where people don't really lock their doors. At least they didn't used to. When I was about 14, female, I got a call to babysit for one of my regulars who had 3 daughters. It was December, so a lot of Christmas work parties were going on. I arrived and we went over the usual rules. She mentions the TV upstairs was out, so once I put the girls to bed just to head downstairs to watch TV. And so after playing with the girls for a while, I sent them off to bed and headed downstairs. I spent a few hours channel surfing. It was about 1:30 AM. I remember grabbing the phone, though I can't remember who I was calling. Maybe my mum or my sister, to let them know I would be really late. But I heard the door open upstairs, which sort of surprised me. The mum enjoyed the nights I babysat as she knew I was a night owl who could be there super late, like 3 in the morning, provided she held the cab for me. It was a small town, but I lived on the other side of it. As I headed upstairs, I heard someone stumble, so I picked up my pace to make sure she was okay, only to find 3 people I had never seen before. There was a clearly drunk woman lying in the doorway, and 2 guys. The guys looked as surprised to see me as I was them. I asked why they were there. The girl had slurred out that they were there for the party. I was confused and asked if they knew Helen, the mother. One of the guys looked me up and down, and I began getting even more uncomfortable at the whole situation. He asked if I was here alone. I remember not wanting to answer because all I could think of was the fact that there were 3 little girls sleeping in the house. I decided instead of answering him, I would simply state that there was no party here and they needed to leave. The girl was adamant that she was here for the party. The guy who had asked me the question took a step forward. I demanded this time that they leave, and we all heard the sound of a phone button being pushed. I had forgotten it was even in my hand, but it seemed to be enough to startle the guy who thought I pushed it on purpose. The guy quickly told the other guy they were leaving and helped the woman up. As soon as they were outside, I slammed the door and locked it, and quickly ran to the front window and watched them. They continued up the block, so it wasn't merely messing up the house numbers for them. The mum returned home 2 hours later and was confused why the door was locked. She was too drunk, so I just told her it made me feel safe. I feel stupid for not telling someone, but they didn't really do anything. To the 3 drunks that one winter night, let's not meet again. Number 4. Backstory. I live in a rural area of Ireland, about 1.5 miles from the nearest village or town. We had a very low crime rate, and mostly everyone are either farmers or mechanics, but the council also built houses and flats within the town for those who need it. But that has led to more trouble than anything. The crime rate had tripled in nearly 2 years from when everyone first moved into the new accommodation. The flats and houses have now been up 10 plus years. So one evening when I was 11 or 12 years old, I was home alone with my friend. She was 12 or 13 years old. We weren't paying attention to anything around us other than watching movies when 5 to 6 random police cars, marked and unmarked, landed on our street with a police van. They were in full riot gear. Thankfully, my older sister, she was 17 or 18 at the time, had come home just before the police had landed and reassured us everything was okay. There was even a police helicopter over our house, garage and fields. The police officers came to our door to search our house and garage. We were spooked and sat quietly in the kitchen. During the search, they heard something over the radio and all left the house and our property, apologizing profusely. We told our parents about it when they got home, and they roughly knew what happened, but we got the full story years later. A couple had moved into one of the flats nearby about 2 months before this kicked off. So when the woman was found dead in the flat with no underlying health issues or no signs of suicide, the partner became a murder suspect fleeing from the law. He didn't get too far, thankfully, but was hiding in my dad's old car shell near the backfield property line. It turns out that they were both junkies living in the flat that the government pays for, and he had injected her and himself with so much drugs that they passed out. When he came to, he seen his girlfriend had OD'd and rang the ambulance, hid the needles and fled. It was about 30 to 45 minutes from the nearest ambulance depot. He didn't know the area so well, so he didn't make it far. I can't remember what the sentence he got was, but he was charged for avoiding arrest and some other things. The same night that the helicopter was out, they also found a very weird heat signature and had stumbled across a wheat farm in someone's attic at a farmhouse. The grower was also arrested and sent to prison, but has since been released and now has a good life and a lovely girlfriend. It's now normal for shit to go down in this town. My friend's parents own a pub, and when they go out of town, he runs the pub for them. They had a violent customer come in once, and when he got kicked out for harassing the female bar staff and the owner's daughter, my friend's sister, the man burned out my friend's very nice, very expensive and well looked after car, which was parked beside the pub. It was parked over some very important electrical lines, and beside a small electricity hub, so the town had to lose power for 5 days while the electricity board had to replace loads of melted wires and an entire new electricity hub.